welcome. We are here with Peri, who's the head of real estate for Industrious. He's in Atlanta, Georgia, hiding out from his 3 little girls who probably are at school. Thank you for joining us today.
Excited to be here.
Awesome. And he confessed that he was at the GWA conference. We did not meet because he went straight from his panel to the bar. a true, so he's been in co-working for 4 years, but that sounds about right. I like it. Yeah. I like how you roll. Yeah. Bar is where all the good networking happens.
It's if we're being honest, he followed Nick Clark, so we all know exactly where Nick was going. Flip had never left the bar, so he was sitting at the bar too.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think he wanted to go downtown one of the days and like go to the bars. And then it was traffic in DC is brutal.
Yeah, that was.
I never have to go back to that location ever.
Yeah. 10 minutes just to get into that casino. That was like a road to nowhere.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Phoenix, baby.
Yeah. And Juicy just announced theirs, right? They're doing
I know. You knew it and you wouldn't tell me. So
no, I didn't know. Did it
tell you?
I didn't know the dates. I knew they were looking at it. Okay. But yeah, next year will be good. Phoenix, Salt Lake City. We're doing immersive in Nashville.
Oh yeah, I gotta put that on my calendar. Yeah, the other two are really easy for me.
If I recall correctly, that was the end of our conversation, Gio, was that I get to come to Phoenix. Because I really haven't spent any time there because Industrious built all these great locations and we're good. So there's not we've kind of expanded and I haven't been out there to do too much BD. So I'll join you in Phoenix.
Okay, nice.
Well, I've got a location we should talk about in Phoenix, don't we, Jamie?
We did. We should talk about that. We'll sell them on that. Done. Offline. Too uncensored for the uncensored.
But it's so good to have you on. I mean, you're like one of those unicorns in the business that everyone's like, I know he exists, but I've never met him. And so
here he is.
I know that Brandon had connected us in the past on a call, but we hadn't actually met until GWA. So it was good to meet you in person and have you up on stage. I mean, you had a great panel, right? You were just mentioning that. Nick Clark, Annie, Mike Creel was on that panel.
Oh yeah, you got to drop in with the All-Stars.
A lot of personalities on the stage.
We all had our beers with us while we're just admitting the drinking events there. No, it was awesome. Like when we were saying earlier, like, I mean, this is some of the really good people in this industry, and like all of them were just great. And I thought it was really candid, which I like doing. And I've honestly never been in front of other occupiers and operators. Like my panels usually landlord panels and BD kind of stuff. And so it was really cool to, I had some guy come up afterwards who's like growing his Honduras co-working company, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool, like how awesome is that? So it was a really fun experience and a new one for me.
Well, it was good to have you there because typically it's Jamie, right? And so, we were trying to put different people on stages and trying to put different personalities on. And so, that's part of what our goal has been. How do we pull more people in, especially from the big ones? I mean, traditionally Jamie shows up and he gives a speech and he leaves, or he's on a panel, he shows up and he leaves, or we get Ryan with Convene, so this one we went a little different route. You were there, and then I think it was Amy Poser from Convene sat on the stage, and then a couple, I guess it would have been like a month ago, I presented at Denver Cornet, and it was supposed to be Jamie again and Ryan, and Jamie was sick. He had a man cold. You can tell him I said that. And so he couldn't make it to Denver. So we had one of y'all's local salesperson, and she was awesome. She did a great job.
Jamie's daughter does wear the onesie, though, so he gets big points for that.
Well, now we got to send Peri one. Peri, I need your address so I can send you a Flex Uncensored vest so that you get a match.
I'm happy to use my children for swag. That's totally fine. I tell Jamie all the time that like his daughter is objectively ridiculously cute. So he is very good for swag. It's like everyone always says that like kids are cute, but she is
legit.
Well, Jamie had just asked you before we got on. And she mentioned you've been in the business 4 years, but you were saying this is your second job, the first of which was not tied to the co-working industry. So why don't you just kind of tell us a little about your background and how you got to your role here.
Yeah, I mean, it actually ended up getting tied to the co-working industry, which is how I got here. So I am an attorney by education, and I worked in-house counsel at a real estate firm here in Atlanta, Jamestown, on City Market and Chelsea Market and One Times Square. I got my job through the normal conventional way, in that I coached the CEO's son in soccer and harassed him until he employed me. I think the first time they actually told me no. And I said, no, you don't really mean that. And I joined as like the associate to the associate counsel. And, by the time I left there, I was in a like kind of hybrid VP role, which was in-house counsel doing, leasing and asset management work, and then also doing kind of like an in-house leasing position. Basically, the idea being that these companies at Jamestown had kind of started with in their infancy, trying to grow them across the portfolio. And, one of the very early locations for Industrious was Pond City Market. And so I met Justin, who's my boss and Jamie's co-founder. And I did this portfolio pitch for him, and he loved it. And, there ended up being a position here and coming doing full time. And I had always planned on transitioning out of law, and it kind of fell in my lap. This is kind of right place, right time. And it's been amazing. It's been a really cool experience. I mean, obviously, when I joined in 2019, I had no idea what was about to happen and what was about to come. It was just kind of a cool opportunity to grow. And, we've been able to navigate, I think, what has been, I've always said, I think that time during COVID, I'll talk about that for the rest of my career. Like, it was just, when you get that kind of experience, there's nothing that beats that education, right? And so, we have a very close team that we were able to keep together through that time. And most of us are still here, and we're having a ton of fun. We're trying to still grow the portfolio. I think I said on the panel, I always say all the time, we're kind of the small dog in the fight of the big three, with 180 locations, worldwide now. So, we still have a lot of growth to do. So it's a really fun time right now.
Fun. Huh. What makes it fun?
What
He
makes
enjoys
it
a challenge.
What
I know, totally.
Honestly, really, it's less challenging in some ways than it was in 2019, because now I always use the analogy that, like, we're starting these conversations on third base.
Okay.
And that I go and talk to these landlords, and they say, like, I get flex. Please don't explain flex to me. I need to have flex. I understand it. In fact, I really like it. And I love Industrious. I know the brand. I've been to your locations. I really want to work with you guys. Just help me understand the structure and how we get it. So it's like,
Okay.
the more
I love your third base analogy. Yeah.
the more sales part
You're
of
like
the
in
job,
the dugout in 2019. You're like trying to get
Right.
called
I'm
up
like,
at that. Yeah.
no, I'm good. I've got people leasing left and right. I don't really like flex. And so, no, so it's interestingly an easier time in that way. But, we talked about this too at the conference. It's a harder time in that my landlord's problems are our problems, right? Like, the restriction, the capital, interest rates, the difficulty of getting a deal done right now, that's real, so you can have a very eager landlord who wants to do it, and they can't, even despite that. So
Gio and I run into our share of those as well. I totally hear you. Okay, but that's still fun for you.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see in such a short period of time. 4 years is not that long. Kind of the general acceptance around the industry from what was kind of, a black hole, or like, we don't really understand it, we don't like it, we don't know if it's competitive, to like the really smart landlords are like, no, I need to have this. And it's like, whoa, that's game changing, right? And that's real.
You were like bleeding edge when you met with Justin and was like, you like this. Yeah,
in a way. I mean, at Ponce, we knew we needed to have flex at Jamestown. And that was definitely, I mean, Jamestown's great at that. So, I mean, they do a lot of things that are leading edge. And, and so that conversation, in 2016 now it's a pretty standard conversation with landlords, which is really cool. And it's really like rewarding to fight really hard, especially during COVID, when all of us hurt and all of us struggled, to come out the other side and see that acceptance is like, it's a nice feeling,
So first uncensored question.
Okay.
and neither of them is probably going to listen to this. So, difference between Jamie and Justin.
Oh, I totally disagree with you. I think Jamie listens to these. Justin will not listen to this. But I I think in a really good partnership, you have to have like a yin and yang, and those two guys could
Oh,
not be more different. Like they could not be more different. And they really do accentuate each other really well. And the woman that I used to work for, Kat, who's moved on, I think Kat Geo,
yeah.
like was
Yeah.
like Jamie's the brain and Justin's the heart. And like I really think that's a really good way of putting it. And it's now working with them even closer over the last year. It's been really cool to watch them work together. They really do. They have a very interesting dynamic, and it works really well to the benefit of the company and all of us. But they're very different. They're very
Oh,
different.
without a doubt. It's so interesting to experience that. So I'll tell you, I knew, and Jamie, I don't know if you know this story, but I knew Justin before Jamie. So I actually met Justin for the first time, but we'd exchanged some stuff prior to GWA pre-pandemic when it was in DC last. And Justin was actually on stage. And I talked to him before,
Oh, he
and
did a
we
management agreement panel.
of
Yeah,
all
I
the
remember that.
stuff. And so I'd been posting nonstop about WeWork, which is kind of how people started following me in a lot of ways. And so I had to leave for a tour for his panel. And I started getting texts, people like, just gave you a shout out from stage about how people needed to follow you. So a few weeks later, I happened to be in New York. And if we're being honest, I wasn't really needing to be in New York, but I flew to New York because Justin would meet with me. So I sat down with Justin. We had a great
Oh,
conversation.
I'm in town. Can I
Yeah.
buy
Yeah,
you a coffee?
totally. We all do
Right
that. We
next
all do that.
door.
Don't act like you don't. And he pulled Kat in, and Kat wanted. So before Kat walked in, I said, "Look, I know hands down, I know more about this industry than any broker in the entire country. I have no doubts about it." And Kat walked in, and you knew Kat, you worked for her, so she shot me down really fast. And I don't know if I turned Justin off with that statement or what, but Justin and I haven't really spoken much since then. I'll text or talk to Jamie occasionally.
I would imagine that Justin loved that. And I am not surprised that was the reaction from Kat at all. That's so funny. She's great. I mean, she was my mentor here and has since run off to start her own very
Yeah,
successful company. So
Huh.
Industrious is great at that. Like there's so many alumni where like they've gone on to do the coolest stuff.
it's
Um,
like self-storage, right?
yeah. It's basically like, hey, landlord, you've got this space that, you
Yeah,
can't really do anything with, be it basement or whatever. And you can do basically a management contract, right? And get revenue coming out of this space. And for most of these people, it's a small storage area, which is perfect. And it's walkable from their apartment versus having to go to some crappy
Yes,
self-storage thing in a
right.
terrible town. It's a brilliant idea. And she's just crushing it right now. So
right. You got basements, you got floors that aren't being used, you have all this. How do you reuse space that is underutilized? Or I've used the B word before, and Jamie tells me I can't use it, so I will not use the word.
Oh, don't please. I'd have to edit it
See,
out. It's a lot of work
see,
to edit.
see, I'm learning. I'm learning. You can teach
Thank
an
you.
old dog new tricks.
I know. I'm
Yeah,
impressed. I'm impressed. Wait,
but
so
yeah, it's just.
if Jamie is
But
listening, I think he stands as maybe my favorite interviewee. We had him on for a live episode. If you haven't listened to it, you got to listen to it. He's
oh,
just
I heard it. Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He worked in journalism too. So like he
that's
just like
right.
this is just right up his alley.
Totally.
well, the beauty
He's
of it is we got him out of his comfort zone, right? And people, a lot of times, people like him. I mean, Ryan for sure too, right? They are so
Yeah.
PR media trained that sometimes you just kind of give them a little twirl, and you're like, oh, so talk about your mom, and they're like, no one's ever asked me about that one. So
Yeah. And his dad and I've met both of them. Actually, Justin did a GWA event. We did this like mini event in 2016 at the Players Club in New York. And it was on like scaling, and Bond Collective did it. And I got Justin to do it. Carr did it. I think it was early enough and it was in town, and Justin was like, all right, I'll do it. They're both fantastic. And their story is so incredible, like that they've been childhood friends and this works so well. It's so unique. And I hope nothing ever ruins that relationship. What do you think? This is, you said you talked to landlords, they like the Industrious brand. They want to, like, what is it, about the team or culture or brand positioning? What's compelling from your point of view?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it's multifaceted. So look, I mean, like everybody loves like a pretty thing, right? So like I think we build out beautiful space, and I think landlords love that, and I think the story is really compelling from the partnership point of view and the way we approach things is, I always say with our landlord partners, it's like, look, like I'm happy to try to figure out whatever with you and put all our cards on the table. Because if it's not going to work now, it'll work later. And I've been here long enough where a conversation that I had 2-3 years ago has turned into a deal. And I think we just try to be open book. And treat our landlord partners like that, like partners. And I think that resonates. I think it helps that like Justin came from real estate. I came from real estate. A lot of people on my team either came from the brokerage world or the landlord world. So we can speak their language, which is really important. When you can tell them like, we ran an NER analysis and looked at this deal from your point of view, they're like, thank you. Like rather than just saying what we need. So that's been, I think those things together is pretty compelling. And I think there's been a lot of people before me, be it Justin or Jamie or Kat or whoever, have done a really good job building those partnerships over a 10+ year run and trying to, do what we say we're going to do and be honest and forthright. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting because so many people, still to this day, what's happening right now is everyone thinks these management deals are easy to do or there's a lot of them, right? And not asking you to dive into yours, but certainly from a macro level handle it. But a lot of these deals aren't actually management deals, right? There's some type of JV or partnership where there is skin in the game. There is some type of guaranteed rent, backstop. And so I think that's the problem is we have a lot of quote unquote influencers or people within the space posting that these management deals are happening. And they're, so can you touch on that without really opening the command too much?
No, I mean, I'm happy to give more information on it. It's funny, like I always tell I tell landlords, I think I said this on that panel as well, is like there's two terms that get used and abused all the time in this industry. It's management contract and enterprise space. Like those two things just get like used and abused left and right. On the management contract front, to me, a management contract means a pure profit share, like a pure, the landlord's approving the budget, they're funding shortfalls, they're in the business with you, and I think over time, we've honestly kind of moved away from the management contract in that point of view, and it started doing way more what I call, especially like as a lawyer, a partnership agreement. And they're really just revenue shares. And really, they're percentage rent retail style leases. That's the way they look. And you can make them GP/LP structures, which landlords understand. And you can use waterfalls and get there. They're REIT friendly, they can still be, they're still a lease. So they're still on they can still be on the building form. Just solves for a lot of problems. I think the flight to management contract was smart because it was the only thing that we knew. We got it from hotels and it was like, okay, this is going to solve our lease problem. And it did solve a lot of the lease problems, but it created a whole lot of other problems. So, I think that structure is kind of the Goldilocks. And you're right, Gio, like you can put base rents in them. You can do that. Now the magic is like, can you do that and still have a low enough break-even occupancy and the right cash margins to be able to say like, this isn't a lease, right? And that's where it gets really tricky. And we really have to stick to our guns. And like, that's where Jamie and Justin and, the other folks on our executive leadership team are like, no, we're not doing that. Like, that's a lease and we're not doing that. Or if we are, like, let's call it what it is. It's not a partnership agreement. It's a lease, right? It's a high TI lease, right? And that's something that you're only going to do if it's the only way. And then we say like, do we even really want to do that, right? So we got to be honest with ourselves. And I think you're right. Like people paint management contract to mean anything. And if you're paying 80% of market, that's not a management contract. That's just a lease.
It's so interesting. So when I started at Regis, Michael Beretta I don't know how well you know Michael, but he's been in the business 30 years on the real estate development side. But he's an Atlanta guy too, so you probably have spent time with him. But either way, he said, look, Giovanni, not every good real estate deal is going to be a good deal for Regis, right? So every good deal for a landlord may not be for us, and every good deal for us may not be good for the landlord, right? And that's what ultimately happens on these deals is people ask me what our role is as a broker / consultant. I'm an educator, educating both sides and trying to bring two parties together. It's not a traditional assignment. And so it's just so interesting when we have those conversations, those dynamics. The other side that you get that a lot of these smaller operators don't get is you're basically entering a contract with a boss, right? As soon as you start doing management deals, especially 100% and certainly a partnership, you now have a boss, right?
Yep. No, I say all the time, and like my wife is in sales, so like it's easy language to take. Like I have clients, like my landlord partners are my clients, and everything from our performance to the way that, our product actually shows up and performs for them in terms of physical and financial nature, like that's all part of my responsibility now. Like if I'm just doing leases, no one cares, right? Like, I mean, they want to see that it's a successful unit, but like they're not beholden to that, right? Like these are clients now. It's very different. And so, we say all the time, like, yeah, we have our members who are our clients and we have our landlords who are our clients. The question is like, who really at the end of the day, like is the really pushing major client, like it's really becoming your landlords, right? Like we really like this business will kind of thrive and survive off of the way that the landlords perceive that we have performed.
100%. And that's the trade-off, right? Is like the easy button in that sense is the lease, because it's hard. Right, that kind of client business is hard. Members are like a good challenge, right? Like, but clients who want a return and have very high expectations and are easy to deal with when things are going well, and then when there are challenges, it's hard to pick the right clients, and more high maintenance, probably more stress, more all those things, but more sustainable over time.
Totally. I mean, like it's tricky too, because I mean, you guys know this, like I always joke like every deal is its own pain in the ass special little snowflake. Like because like you can't just treat every landlord, like you can just like rinse, wash, repeat, like this is going to be the same thing. Like they have different capital requirements, they have different equity, they have different lenders, they have different holding, years, they have different plans for their asset. Like, and so like I have to listen at the beginning and be like, okay, like you're a large institutional fund, we got to go this way. Okay, you're like a small, high net worth, private group that's going to keep this asset forever. Like, okay, we can go a different way, and it's like you kind of have to push, the structure each way to kind of make those deals work.
That's why he thinks it's fun. You're right. He likes the challenge.
Each of the decision makers has a totally different personality, right? So you're playing this psychology game of understanding what their past experiences and pain points and fears and anxieties are, and trying to figure out how to explain it to them or sell it in a way that is going to get them comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Gio, I have a personal question. Ready? Okay. So Peri, you mentioned 3 kids. We want to know how old they are. And then you mentioned your wife is in sales. How do we have 2 working parents with 3 kids?
Oh boy, she's in Seattle right now too, so I'm flying solo.
Oh boy.
Which is why I'll be leaving for daycare right after this. So, I have a 7-year-old girl, a 4-year-old girl, and then my youngest is going to turn 2 next month. I'm very lucky. Both my brothers live in my neighborhood in walking distance. They both have 3 kids, like a very good Greek family. We have to stay very close together just in case. You never know.
I love it.
And my parents and my wife's parents live 30 minutes away.
Okay. Good move. So good strategic decisions. Yeah.
We have a ton of help.
Well done.
Yeah.
So, and then, Allie and I have both prioritized our careers, and she kills it in ad sales and does a great job. And you just gotta be very honest with your partner about what you can do and can't do. And the kids have to be in daycare because otherwise this is not going to work. So I'm very lucky to have a great partnership. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, the other part of the question, I'm going to add another part to it. She said the girls' names and their ages, but I'm going to add one to it. And I've never used this one before. So obviously, it's so interesting with children because you have a different relationship with each child because they've got different personalities. They see you different. They're different ages. So in addition to their names and ages, if they were to say that you reminded them of a certain character, what would it be?
Woo!
A certain character. Oh man. Each kid saying, who does my dad? Okay. All right. Okay. So my oldest is Penelope. And so I had to have Greek names, but I was also like terrified of giving them a name that you just could not pronounce and having like, Steliopoulos as a child. Yeah. So
wait, is Penelope Penny for short?
No. And would be very upset if that happened.
Like, no Penny. Got it.
Penelope. She'll let me call her P, and sometimes we call her Master P. But otherwise, she's just P. She is the very emotional, like very connected to her feelings empath. And so I think for her, in a lot of ways, like I have to play guardian and like protector with her. So I'm trying to think of like a good one, from one of her movies. I don't know, who would that be in Frozen? I don't know who I would be in Frozen in that. Let's use Frozen characters. I'd be the good guy in Frozen, whatever the hell his name is. Now I can't remember. His name is. Okay. Yeah, I would be that. And then with Lena is my middle one, and she is just like an absolute powerhouse of a human, and she could go to college tomorrow and she would make a million friends and she would be just fine. And for her, I am definitely like more like her, partner in being silly. So we'll go with Olaf on that one. Okay. And then Arya is my youngest. And like when they're two, like you're just figuring out their personality. I'm a little terrified for my older two that they don't realize that she's the alpha yet, because she is the alpha and it is like quite scary. I don't know who my character would be for her. I gotta think about that one, Gio. She's like, they all go through like an obsession with dad phase. It's like very short and you feel so great when that's happening. And right now she's in that phase, which is very nice. And I'm just like, I know it's gonna end eventually.
Until they're teenagers and then they want nothing to do with your wife. And so they'll be back.
That's what. So I grew up with brothers, and I have a little sister, but she's quite younger than us. And my wife is always like, at some point, I will be just the biggest villain to all of them, but they will always love you. So she's like, when they get older, it's me who's gonna have a really hard time, but you'll always be safe. And I'm like, okay, well, I hope that's true.
Yep.
So hopefully you're okay with this, but when my interaction with you so far, I get Baloo, right? You're so chill, laid back, fun loving. So Baloo's the bear sings the bare necessities from Jungle Book.
I like that.
Jungle Book.
I'm down with that. Yeah, he's great.
There hasn't been a new Jungle Book yet.
Yeah, I think that's a compliment. I take that as a
big old teddy bear.
I love that. I love that. I take that as a compliment. Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right, Jamie, back to regular programmed professional questions that you wrote down ahead of time.
I totally have a list.
I know.
Well, I guess, my next question is, and you can answer this however you want. No secret sauce required, but the market post pandemic, little more suburban friendly, not so CBD. How are you guys looking at like location? Where are you going in the next 5 years?
I love when this comes up, and I love that suburban friendly seems to be a trend for a lot of groups, because suburban is trickier for us. Just to be like, if we're going to go uncensored, like suburban is actually the thing. And I think Jamie would say this too, that like we like squint at and we have a little bit more hesitation over like, well, what does that mean, right? Like we have a location in Dedham, Massachusetts, just kills it, right? And it's with WS Development, with Nuveen backing them, and they're doing all the right things. Great retail, great, mixed use, and but like that's a pretty high end suburb, right?
Yeah.
Up
New
here.
Jersey, but you're in
Yeah,
Cherry Hill, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Same. Is that
exactly.
similar? Okay.
And like, how many of those are there really, right? Would be my question. And then like Avalon here in New Jersey, like Spaces is there and they have a wait list no matter what, because like it doesn't matter what, like they're just going to crush it because of that. So our network strategy has to be, it's probably the harder slash more fun part of the job now is like there are times when you just see it, it when you see it, and you're just like, yeah, absolutely. And so we're opening in a location in Lohi in Denver that's across the highway. It's a mile and change from CBD downtown Denver, where we also are, and we do fine there. Like I wouldn't like put that on the mantle as the best performing Industrious ever, but we do fine. This one that's opening a mile and a half away is opening like 40% pre-sold and is going to ramp in like 6 months, and it's just insane. And it's like that's less, it's like a mile and change as the crow flies, and that just speaks to this like micro market sub market. But of course you go to Lohi, there are no office buildings, right? It's like it's a neighborhood kind of thing. So it's like now I got to go to these locations, I got to find 25,000 square feet of office in a place that is not an office
Yeah.
market. And then I got to convince them to do the structure we just talked about.
Right.
So,
Right.
it
Easy
just
day.
is like, it's a ton of fun, really, but it's really hard. So, I know it when I see it. It's really hard to get those things to transact. And then I would say suburban is where we, pause a little bit. And I think we have more to learn and more to figure out. So we're going to do, some suburban stuff and say, like, okay, let's see how this works. Because I don't have that as down as, clear as the whatever you want to call them, live, work, play, urban,
Yeah.
couple of whatever.
Yeah.
So taking it a step further, right? So everyone is kind of re-strategizing, reprioritizing, just trying to figure out what's going on, right? And so, I mean, no surprise, everyone's talking about WeWork and all their closures and everything going on with them. But you guys too have also kind of stepped back and reprioritize certain markets and given space back. I mean, give you a great example. I mean, Raleigh, Durham, y'all had two locations, which I've toured a bunch of times and met with Highwoods. And I'm like, at some point they're going to merge the two locations because you were both locations were about 50% full, give or take. And I'm like, that's awesome. You got one location that's 100% full. And so there, you guys have been doing, and Regis has done this a bunch of times, right? Because they would acquire all kinds of operators, and then they'd be oversaturated in the market, and they had to right size, right? And so it's you guys are doing, not only the contraction, right? Where you merging locations and doing all that stuff, but also the growth. And so, how is that kind of playing out overall?
Oh man, yeah. God, like you take that Raleigh situation and it just is like the best intentions and how much the world changed, right? Like the
Yep.
first location, because I did that. The first location, I was involved in all of it. The first location was completely full pre-COVID, completely full, waiting list, no room to expand, not that big. You don't look at the market and say, God, we've got 70,000 square feet already. It was like 25. So it was like, okay, we can't expand. We're not quite meeting demand. There's a way to, open another location and have them both be, symbiotic and be great. And that is not where COVID left Raleigh. Like downtown Raleigh is not that city anymore. And that
Yep.
sucks. But, I said in that point, and I'm happy to say it here too, like Industrious can't fix downtown Raleigh. I would love to, but like, it's like some of these locations, I don't really have an answer for what's going to happen because there's so many things outside of our control, and whether that's Pittsburgh or downtown Raleigh or whatever, I think you do have a responsibility as an operator and a fiduciary to say, like, these aren't the markets that they were when we entered them in 2016, 17, 18.
Right.
And we got to figure it out. And again, like you go to it with the best intentions possible and you try to do it, as honestly as you can. And it's not a fun situation. It's the least fun part of my job, but you have to do that. You have to be looking at your network, especially in this time where office is so muddled and no one knows what's going on and no one knows what the next few years are going to look like. You have to do that. So it's the first time in the company's history that we have done that.
Mhm.
Was, over these last few years. But I think as the network gets bigger and bigger, like that is an unfortunate reality, right? So yeah, it's not, I think we've done the majority that we need to do there, but you know, that's part of this business as well. And you just handle it the best you can.
Yeah, no, and it's the reality of it. Go ahead, Jamie.
I was just curious, what's your sweet spot for size?
I have found that, you know, I I think the magic really happens above 20 something square feet, 20,000 something square feet, because we got to cover our costs and our staffing is a big
Yeah.
part of our costs. And so we're going to staff a 15,000 square foot unit the same way we're going to staff a 28,000 square foot unit. It comes to the member experience manager, who's the person operating the space. So at 25, I feel like, okay, now we can start getting the landlord to the returns they want to see to justify the capital. And really, I don't really feel like above 40 is too appropriate in any market right now, except maybe Manhattan, you know, and some of those bigger scale markets. So most of what we're doing is probably between 25 and 40 right now.
All right,
Wow.
Gio, 1 minute left.
1 minute left. What do we want to go, personal or business? Let's go there.
Well, I have my wrap up question, so you can ask one more business
I just
question.
need to watch that. I need to watch the Jungle Book with my kids now. That's
I
what
know. I
I'm
was thinking the
thinking.
same thing. I was like, oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
So,
I've seen that.
I think your real estate, and obviously this is, I was on the Regis team for 4.5 years, so I know how we kind of handled the real estate, right? It was us, and then we let JL and CBRE go out and negotiate. Y'all's internal strategy is a little bit different. And so, I mean, how has that shifted or changed? What's your team dynamic look like now that you're in charge rather than Kat? And, you know, because I think a big part of it is people want to know, how do we get a hold of Industrious? And it's not a traditional broker, right? I mean, y'all have broker partners / relationships, but it's more of introduction type of deal. And then you've got all these account managers / real estate partners throughout the country. So kind of explain that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. It is impossible to have brokers act in the full like possibility of what their role could be in the way that they act for a traditional tenant. Because like, how could you possibly know, you know, like all of the internal things in our model and what's going on? And you know, it's like it's just too much to ask. Now, I will say that like when I have an exceptional broker in a market, it is like gasoline on a fire. Like we have incredible representation in South Florida, incredible representation in LA, like in Austin, and a lot of key markets. I have brokers who can talk the talk, who also can like be out in the market constantly talking about Industrious. And that's really important because they have the connections and know things that I'm not going to know. And that is the power
Yep.
of brokers. And so I really, it is a combination of the two things, right? Like I don't, and I think that is a little bit different than maybe the way it was viewed in the past. Is like I really believe in having a very powerful local broker who can intro me, but who also can make things happen, who can know, hey, like this tenant needs to get out of their space. You need to go talk to this guy, like the things that aren't on CoStar, right?
And who
So
knows
like
the nuances of like the neighborhoods, like your Denver example, right? Like, yeah,
totally,
you're doing
totally.
a
And
lot
I
of
say
triangulation to end up there and have that space like 40% pre-leased. Nailed
totally.
it
And I
on the
say
location.
totally. And I say that all the time to my brokers is like, you know, this city way better than I am ever going to. So if I say
Yep.
something you don't agree with, you have to tell me. And you also have to tell me, like, you're not looking at this, you need to go look at this. And so they're way more in the network strategy, site selection, introduction world. The negotiations have to be with us. So, like, that is the difference. And I think, you know, like we have a very good team. I've got three people on my team who can all do that independent of me, that know when they need to call me. And it takes a long time to kind of cultivate those people and grow them, and that's a big part of my job, and I love that part of my job. And I think the least tenure person we have has been here almost 3 years. So most of the people have been here as long as I have, and that's awesome. How cool is that? So it's a combination of those two things, Gio. But like the powerful local broker is so important, especially when they can understand the structure and introduce it to a landlord and say, no, it's not what you think. It's like this. Now go talk to Peri. That's huge.
Yeah. For sure. All right, Jamie, go for it.
Okay.
Wrap us up.
Last question before you hit the daycare. Peri, you're in the casino at the GWA conference and karaoke breaks out. What is your karaoke song?
What is my karaoke song? Did you guys see that Elton John is selling his place in Atlanta? So he's selling his place in Atlanta and lived here for a long time. And I got to meet him. This is a true story. I worked valet in the building that he lived in college. And I think I'm Still Standing would be like just that would be such a good song, you know, like it's a little bit of the vibe of Industrious right now. And also like, you know, Flex and Office in general. And just like that's a good song.
Okay. Love it. All right. Gio, thanks for having Peri on. And Peri, thank you for taking the time to do this. We appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And for engaging with the GWA. And we look forward to seeing you in Phoenix.
Awesome. Enjoyed it.